Hi, everyone, and welcome back. We're going to talk about preventing prompt dependency. So, what are things that we can do to help our clients, our learners, not become prompt dependent? It's when learners become over reliant on prompts and they fail to respond independently, even when they already have the skill. They know what they're doing, but they just can't do it independently because they're so used to that prompt. Our job is to teach the skill, not the prompt. Providing prompts should decrease over time and the learner gains independency. So it is a really common issue. I see so many kids get prompt dependent and it will limit their skill acquisition. You really need to be proactive with fading and reinforcing independent responses. The learner might look at the technician instead of the task, waiting for the prompt so their focus isn't on the task at hand. They pause a long time until the prompt is given. The learner waits for the prompt from the technician before responding, even though they know the skill. They repeat the prompt instead of responding. They don't respond until they get that physical touch. The learner requires physical guidance and then fails to generalize to other people or setting. When you're having trouble with generalization, there's a good likelihood that it's prompt dependent. When you start seeing these things, we really have to look at it carefully to determine if it's prompt dependency. Keep in mind why this is happening. We use so many prompts in this therapy. They need the prompt to do it correctly, and that's not the overall problem. But a lot of time the learning, your learner doesn't know it's a prompt that you're going to fade. They just think it's part of their learning trial. So then it's in their head like, oh, they'll touch me when I need to do this. And that's part of their stimulus prompt. You have to make sure you're looking at it from the learner's perspective as well. I think people get kind of mad sometimes. Like, I don't know why they always want the prompt. The reason is because we taught them that. It's not their fault or something they did wrong. It's something we did wrong. This really limits true skill acquisition. They don't actually learn the skill. If they can't do it independently, it prevents generalization. So they can't go into another setting because that setting might not have those prompts. So now they can't learn this in different settings. It reduces confidence and engagement, so it makes them less motivated and they feel like they can't succeed. It increases frustration or prompt-seeking behavior. Prompt dependency can lead to frustration for the learner who may become increasingly passive and start actively seeking out prompts. This can cause a learner to struggle in the natural environment. In the real-world setting, with structured prompts, the learner with prompt dependency may be unable to independently demonstrate these skills. So root causes is when you prompt too soon, you're never giving them that delay to see if they have independence. Relying too heavily on verbal prompts, so overusing verbal cues instead of fading to more subtle prompts. Not planning for prompt fading. If there's no prompt fading in your written skills plan and your behavior plan, there's a problem. We have to go back to the drawing board and talk about prompt fading and what that's going to look like. Reinforcing prompted behavior equally, so reinforcing all independent or non-independent responses the same. The independent responses should get better reinforcement, or they'll just wait for their prompt. Using prompts inconsistently across stuff, such a huge problem. I can see I've gone into houses or like I'm watching techs work and I mark down verbal prompts, and I'll have one tech who verbal prompts the whole time and another tech who barely verbal prompts. Those should be equal. It's really hard because a lot of our stimulus prompts are verbal as well. So you have to understand the difference. Our SDs, like do this. Those are verbal, and those are not considered verbal prompts. It's when you give them the correct answer as part of when they've been incorrect. That's the verbal prompt. It's hard to differentiate that this is the direction and this is a prompt, and I need to try to do the direction without a prompt to see if they can do it. That can be a huge issue. Both texts should be verbal prompting at the same level. Don't use prompts if you don't have to. Even like having a couple extra wrong trials is better to just see where we're at unprompted. Start fading as early as possible. Like always fade if you can. The second you have 80% accuracy with prompting over like 3 trials, fade, fade, fade. Just start the fading as soon as possible. Always independent responses should get more reinforcement than prompted correct responses. If you ever see an independent response when you weren't expecting it, like you've been prompting, and then all of a sudden they do it independently, make sure that reinforcement is huge, like so much praise, so much everything. It communicates that this is supposed to be independent and that's the skill. If you can do it, let's have you do it independently. Build prompt fading into every written skill prompt. Don't ever not have it. And then always talk with your BCBA about this. If you feel like they're becoming prompt dependent, start talking about prompt fading, about prompt dependency, about independent responses. Like, what should we do if in this case to see if we can improve? A refresher for prompt hierarchy so you know how to fade. Full physical is the most intrusive, the most prompting you can do to an individual. Partial physical is less intrusive than full physical. Then comes modeling, you demonstrating it, and then gesturing, and then verbal. All your stimulus prompts come after verbal. But the verbal is there, that's true, but if you're overusing it, it would move up the hierarchy. If you use it way too much, then it becomes very intrusive. And then, of course, independent is at no prompting. It's the very top, the optimum situation, what we're shooting for. Time delay is a technique used in ABA, and so what it is waiting to give the prompt. This is the easiest way to determine if we should prompt fade. If you continually utilize a delay, then what will happen is you'll always know if your learner's independent ready. And if they're independent ready, then you can remove prompting. It allows us to either move into fading or independent faster. So use delay as much as possible. So we'll talk about differential reinforcement a lot in this course, but we aren't there yet. But what it is reinforcing one thing and not reinforcing something else. So for this slide or for within prompt dependency, what you're doing is you're reinforcing those independent responses and not reinforcing no prompted responses. Now we want to do this slowly over time. So when we're in skill acquisition, when they're learning these things, you might reinforce prompted. Then you'd move to just prompting for correctness and not reinforcing that. And then the second you are fading your prompting a little, you would reinforce again. But you differentially reinforce the response that is less prompted or the independent response. So putting this into skill acquisition plans, if you see a skill acquisition plan and you don't see a prompt fading plan, we need to go back to the drawing board, talk to our supervisors. You should have what kind of prompt to use, when to fade, how correct do they need to be with that prompt before I fade, how to fade, are you doing least to most time delay, what counts as independence, and what to reinforce. That all should be included. They also should write a prompt hierarchy. So though we have this like prompt hierarchy that I taught you and works for most people, occasionally there's learners who the prompt hierarchy might be a little different. Like it's less intrusive for them to have some sort of prompt. So know where your learner is on their own hierarchy. Always use time delay so that you know when we've had independence. You can do constant or progressive time delay. I throw in time delay, even if the plan's not time delay. Every once in a while, I throw in a time delay trial or two just to see. Reinforce independent responses more than prompted. So always use that differential reinforcement. Okay, so this is an example of prompt fading. So we start with a physical prompt. It's a partial, but it's still physical. With physical prompts, I would always see how they respond to a partial before moving to a full. Because some people just don't like physical prompts, and that's okay. We don't want to physically prompt them. We use a hand on the back to physically guide the learner into a seated position. Then we would fade to gestural. We'd start pointing at the chair. when we said sit down, and then we would implement a time delay of 3 seconds. We'd say sit down, give them 3 seconds, and then we would provide the prompt if they don't sit down, and then we would reinforce any sort of independent response we saw enthusiastically when the learner sits down without the prompt, and then we just fade all prompts. With this prompting, the sit down is not a verbal prompt, it's the directions. So how we can kind of tell the difference between like what are most of the time you'll know, but if it's a little tricky, what are the directions or what is the stimulus and what is the verbal prompt? If the behavior you want to see, if the words you say would be said in the natural environment, then it's your stimulus, it's your directions. Anything extra would be prompting. A teacher might say to the child, sit down. The parent might say, sit down. We're trying to get the behavior of sitting down when they hear the word sit down. So that it's not a verbal prompt. So you don't ever fade the sit down. That's your directions. Okay. And you want to make sure that you're, always reinforcing the behavior when they sit down independently. Mix and maintenance tasks with easy trials when the learner is likely to become independent. This builds momentum and reduces frustration. So this is really, really critical. So if they're struggling with sit down, you might throw in something, some sort of verbal direction that they always do, and they do it really well. That way they get to be successful. You praise them and make a big deal about it so that they don't get too frustrated when you're teaching them something more difficult, okay? So you want to make sure you're adding in those kind of maintenance tasks to build behavior momentum, to get them excited about the therapy, to show them they can be successful. Okay. So a lot of this is staff consistency is the most important thing. All team members should use the same type and level of prompt, reinforce the same way, and follow the same fading plan. Avoid using different prompts across staff, reinforcing prompted responses differently, and fading to follow the same fading plan. And inconsistency creates prompt dependency. And then collaboration will always help this consistency. The more you talk, discuss it, talk to your supervisor, talk to the other techs about what you're all doing, the better this will get. Common mistakes that kind of lead to this is the prompt too quickly. We talked about that. Never fading can really lead to prompt dependency. Relying too much on verbal cues can lead to prompt dependency. So we add in those verbal cues all the time, like, oh no, look over here, do this. Those little verbal directions you give throughout therapy that aren't the actual direction, those are prompts. We got to stop that. You should only do that if that's in the behavior plan. Reinforce the prompted response equally, reinforce prompted and independent. When you do that, it will lower the motivation to respond independently. Collecting data on prompting levels and independent responses is crucial to identify and address prompt dependency. Tips for prevention in daily practice. Try to use a delay. Don't be afraid of silence. It's so important. I've done it so much. You'll get used to it. It's very awkward at first. It's not natural. You want to fill the silence. Normally, when you feel like filling it, it's a verbal thing, and that's a verbal prompt, and now you're messing up a little bit. So make sure you pause before prompting. Don't repeat the instruction multiple times. That's a huge one. Everybody does that. I've seen very experienced techs not do that. As they get better, they stop. But the new techs, I've never actually seen one not do that. We all do that, especially if you work with kids a lot, because you're not in that real like critical this kind of setting. If you're, at an after school program teaching, whatever, babysitting, when you go like, hey, we got to clean up the toys and the child ignores you, which always happens. You go, okay, did you hear me? We got to clean up the toys. Come here. We got to clean up the toys. Like we say it over and over again. In those settings, if you're just babysitting someone or if you're just like at an after school program, it's okay. You are teaching them like, hey, if I like, you don't have to follow my directions the first time. Like I'll say more times than you have to follow the fifth time. You are teaching them that. So I don't recommend that. In ABA setting, it can cause trouble. It causes dependency. Keeping your hands and bodies neutral and less prompting. Again, another one, we all wanna point to the thing we just wanna help them, right? It's not bad. You have no bad intentions when you're accidentally prompting. We just wanna help them. Point to the right thing, kinda touch their hand in the right direction. We just have to not do that. In this setting, we're taking data on those things. I would rather them be incorrect than have you accidentally prompt them when it wasn't warranted yet. Reinforce all attempts, even imperfect. Positive reinforcement, even for unprompted responses that are imperfect, we'd still reinforce that. Give space for the learner to think and act. Again, a lot of people have slower processing who have developmental disabilities, and they may need more time. That might be a forever thing. There's people who just forever need more time, and that's okay. We wanna meet them where they're at. And so knowing that and giving them that time, and again, that goes to that silence part. You gotta be silent. You gotta let them think during that time. When to talk to your supervisor. So when you're starting to see prompt dependency, so they're looking at you, they're pauses until prompted, repeats prompts, fails to respond without physical guidance, or struggles to generalize, we need to start talking about it. You're unsure how to fade something. So what's my hierarchy? What am I fading? You can fade within prompts too. So that's another thing I didn't talk as much about. But like you can fade out going from full to partial to like one little touch, you can fade out physical. The fading plan isn't working, the learner's not making progress towards independence, and then you're getting inconsistent data across trials. There's discrepancies in how prompts are being used and how responses are being reinforced by the staff members. You wanna all have a chat together. It's not like calling people out. I've heard that, like, "Oh, I don't wanna call them out." It's just gonna help them, and, like, your supervisor knows they're not doing it with the intention of, like, hurting someone or making them prompt dependent. They're all doing it and with the intention of, like, helping the person and making sure they're right. So your supervisor knows that, and the other tech will understand that. It's not intentionally harmful. It's only accidentally harmful, but it's better for them to get training and learn what they're doing wrong so that they can do it correctly, and then odds are if they're adding in prompts with this client, they're probably adding in prompts with their other clients. It's like prompts become habits for the techs and the supervisors. So it would be better to get them training and make sure nobody's becoming prompt dependency who's getting therapy from them. So prompt dependency is preventable with planning consistency. We can stop it. Prompts should never decrease over time. Prompts should be faded systematically. Independence is our goal, not perfect responding. So if it's imperfect, we're still gonna reinforce that and praise that. Prevention takes planning, consistency, and really good data. Thank you. I'll see you next video.